the seeds of that, that creative, getting the mind flowing, listening to jazz, listening to all kinds of crazy stuff, Manhattan Transfer, the Double Six, these vocal groups, and from all over the world. And the record collection was just like completely out there. I mean, not the normal kind of collection that you'd probably expect from a family of his generation. So that's where I suppose the music seed came from. And he taught me a little bit of guitar, and then I took it in my own direction. And
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Set Listing Bruce, your podcast all about Bruce Springsteen, his music, and mostly his fans. I am your host, Jesse Jackson. Joining me today is one of my friends from up north. I love when I have Canadians visit me. I was just talking to my new friend, Paul Tebow, and I warned him that usually when I have a Canadian, we go long, and he said that was okay with him. So, Paul,
this is where I'm supposed to say thank you, right?
Right. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Jesse, thank you so much for having me on, man. It's an honor. I am really, really happy, and I appreciate you staying up late too, because I know you're a hardworking guy. So thank you for making the time, man. I really do appreciate it.
Well, it is no problem. We are Ken Rosen is the matchmaker in this discussion. Yeah, Ken Rosen, friend of the podcast, who does the amazing, blog, had posted a link to a Bruce Springsteen cover you had done on his Cover Me.
Quick anecdote on that. I mean, listen, I'm a small, account, right? I mean, I don't have a ton of followers. And so, I mean, I care more about, I suppose, just being able to do the content and having fun creating, content that I'm passionate about, rather than really checking out the traffic. And I noticed by mistake, like I checked out the analytics of my YouTube channel and said, why am I getting so many hits on this Bruce Springsteen cover? So I dug a little deeper and I found out that a link to my video was on his website. And I'm like, that's crazy. So the eStreetShuffle.com was the source of this traffic. And so digging a little deeper, and who's this Ken Rosen guy? And then finding out about you with your interview with him. It was great. It was, the dominoes are falling, and I reached out by doing a small video to say, thank you, Ken. I mean, it was like, I was blown away. I was honored. It was really cool.
Paul, I've told this story multiple times on the air, but, my wife was like, why do you want a podcast? Like, what do you get out of it? And I told her, I said, do you remember your brother Ralph talking about playing music? And she goes, I don't think so, but maybe remind me. And so her brother is about 10 years older than her. And so he grew up in his high school days were the 60s.
Right.
The garage band, everyone had a band. You played at the CYO, the Legion Hall, just like Bruce talks about, in his things. Yeah. And Ralph played bands all the way through high school and even part of his college. And he said, he was talking the other day that, this was several years ago, he said, if I had my way, me and my buddies would go into a barn on Sunday afternoons and we would just play. And we wouldn't care if there was an audience. We wouldn't care if anyone, but just the joy of playing music together, I would just love. And she goes, yeah, I do remember that story. I said, well, that's podcasting to me. I have a good conversation with someone, and if people listen to it, great. I hope they do. But if they don't, I got to spend an hour talking to someone interesting and sharing stories. And she goes, okay, I get it.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. Listen, you're such a personable guy. It's obvious. I mean, that people could warm up to you in the heartbeat. You make people feel comfortable, and I don't even know you. We never met, and I mean, I feel like we could be buds, And so I think that's important to sort of surround yourself with people that make you feel comfortable, that cheer you on, that support you, and doing that as a host, as a podcast host, there's for sure got to be a passion there for you, and it shows in your work. It's like it's your art form, you know.
Yeah.
And I think any artist or creator, I mean, needs to be able to follow their passions, and that's kind of hard to do at first. A lot of naysayers, a lot of negative energy. So when you surround yourself with people that you get along with, that you are happy with,
Mm-hmm.
I can only assume, man. I mean, you meet some pretty cool people doing your show. So, I mean, that's got to pick you up during on the good days and the bad days, right?
It does, and you know, it's funny because what led to me in that story is you talking about, you know, you make the content for you, right? You pick the songs you want to perform, and we're going to get to a little more specifics, but you know, you pick the songs, you record the video, you put out the songs, and you are doing this. Yes, you're glad people like it, but you know, you serve yourself first, right? You're the audience of the first, and I think that's great.
I'm glad that we are on the same page for that, because
Yeah,
especially these days, pandemic, right? I mean, a
yeah,
lot of people spending maybe more time than they would, maybe more free time, maybe more introspective time,
hmm,
uh, searching online,
yeah,
finding new sources of inspiration, and connecting with those people that maybe wouldn't have had the time otherwise to be creators or to
yeah.
be, you know, content providers. There's more consumers out there looking at people's stuff and listening to music, and just getting inspired. So yeah, maybe that's one of the reasons why we got connected, can or
Absolutely.
otherwise.
Yeah.
It's a good thing. It's
So
definitely a
I
good thing.
do. We're going to work on trying to get some video up, so people will see both of us. But most of the people will just see this audio. But I do have to share with my audience, and I'm going to tell you a story, Paul. Um, when you know, a couple of years ago, Bruce put out an autobiography, and he mentioned that when he got his first success, where he really got money and he had paid off some of his debts, um, he wanted guitars in every room. He bought as many guitars as he could find and he put them in every room. And I
Right.
don't know if you've seen any videos from his letter to you, but in his studio, just in the background, are just rows of guitars. Well, Paul may have a similar concern because as I'm talking this,
You see him.
yeah, there is guitars all over the wall in the
Yeah,
room that he's talking to me. So
that's so funny. I mean, I
yeah,
didn't know where that segue was going, but yeah,
yeah,
that's it's not. I won't say that I did it because I was inspired by Bruce,
yeah,
but very similar motivations for that is to say these guitars can't stay in their cases.
right.
And all of these have very emotional, sentimental value for me for various reasons. Yeah, I thought they have to go on display. So it's one of the first things I did when I renovated this project studio. Is like I'm putting them up. They got to go up. There's no doubt about it.
It's a great, and in one of Bruce's interviews he was doing for this new album he did, Letter to You, he reached over and he says, "Oh, this was the guitar I wrote most of the Nebraska on, you know," and he had that history. And there's a song on his new album, House of a Thousand Guitars, and it's a good song. It's a great song, but I laugh at someone on Twitter said, when my wife heard the lyrics House of a Thousand Guitars, she looked over at me and said, "Don't get any ideas."
In my circle of friends, we call that gas. We say, "Hey, you
Yes.
got gas?" It's like, "Yeah, what is that? It's gear acquisition syndrome." That's
Yeah.
definitely
Yeah. I like that.
a
I like that a
big
lot.
problem among some of my
Yes.
musician friends and I.
Yes.
Hiding stuff from your better half.
Unfortunately, in my day job, I am a customer service manager. I run a call center, and gas to us is give a S. Uh, we are looking for agents that have gas that give a blank.
That's
Um,
hilarious, man.
so before we get onto your background, how are you doing during this pandemic? How you hanging in there?
It's great to be able to have the opportunity to work during the pandemic. I'm very fortunate, and I don't I don't take that for granted. Every single day I wake up, I'm thankful for my particular situation. So I managed to sort of stay employed and work from home. And that's not the case. A lot of people that are working from home that really just are miserable about that. I love it. I mean, I'm working
Mhm.
here,
Yeah.
so I got my laptops and my screens, all that set up. It's a good situation for me. Thankfully, all my family have been able to stay healthy. My two young girls Up here in Montreal, we've got, certain regulations. There's a curfew. After 8 p.m., you're not allowed to be out at all on the streets. They're giving out, $2,000 tickets if they catch you. I've taken full advantage. I've been working from home since March.
Yes.
And I've been recording. I've been doing music. I've been, creating videos and content and meeting awesome people, present company included. So I particularly love this and wish it could go on forever, despite the fact that because of what's causing it, it's so terrible.
Yeah.
The toll is going up every single day. So it's chaos. It's cold calculated things that are happening. But at the same time, it's creating new opportunities for people. And I think that's just the nature of, it's nature of life. Good things come from chaos. As long as it doesn't last too long. So for me personally, it's probably one of the best times that have ever happened to me. I'm going to be releasing a lot of music. Many great originals are going to come out of this. A lot of stories, and when you talk to people to get them to share about themselves, I feel like that's what I'm getting the chance to do, because I'm collaborating with a lot of musicians and a lot of artists that I wouldn't have met otherwise. They're also at home during pandemic. Like, what the hell else am I going to do? Let's write a song. Let's cut an album. Let's do this and that. Neat. So that's what's happening for me during pandemic. It's, all of the best and all the worst wrapped up into the same bucket.
Paul, I had a little bit of the same thing when middle of March, we went into lockdown. I had started a new job in February. And so for 2 months we were locked down. We went back in the office in May and we've been there ever since. But, I started podcasting a lot more, and my wife always laughs at me. She says, I can tell when you're under stress, you do a lot more podcasts. It's a way to relieve stress. And so I get that. I get that feeling of, creativity and talking to people and doing that. So that's great. All right. So I always like to go to the beginning. So Paul, talk about growing up. Where did you grow up at? And was your family musical? Was there a lot of music as you were a kid?
I was born in Montreal. I've lived in Montreal my whole life. I haven't had the chance to travel too much, although I have been a few places, throughout my youth and growing up, but primarily a Montrealer, Canadian, my whole life. My dad was French Canadian. He was a carpenter. But prior to becoming a father, he was a musician. He was a jazz guitarist. And the guitars you see, well, your viewers can't see them if they're on the podcast, but I do have, like you mentioned, those guitars on my wall are inherited from my dad's jazz days. So that's why you see a couple of those semi-hollow body guitars on there were his outlet, his passion. And he was a very accomplished jazz guitarist. And then decided to, I suppose, do right what he thought was doing right by his family and become a carpenter.
So did he keep his hand in music?
And he basically gave me the seeds of that, that creative, getting the mind flowing, listening to jazz, listening to all kinds of crazy stuff, Manhattan Transfer, the Double Six, these vocal groups, and from all over the world. And the record collection was just like completely out there. I mean, not the normal kind of collection that you'd probably expect from a family of his generation. So that's where I suppose the music seed came from. And he taught me a little bit of guitar, and then I took it in my own direction, and of course, went on from there, started doing cover bands and whatnot.
Did you embrace the music that he was sharing with you, or did you have
100%.
You didn't you did not have a rebel phase where you went to find your own kind of music or voice?
Well, Jesse, it's like I tell my girls every day. I said, when I grow up one day, I'm going to have this all sorted out. And they just laugh and they agree. They're like, you're just a big kid, Dad, which is so true. The music that he was introducing me to was indirectly, because what would happen is that I worked with my dad when I was a kid, because we had a family company, family business, the construction business. And so we'd come back from a long day or a long week or weekend, and we'd work, a lot of overtime sometimes to make ends meet. And what would happen is that at the end of the day, the meal is long done, and have a beer, a glass of wine, and then from the basement would sort of linger this slowly increasing volume of beautiful jazz guitar, just, creeping up from the basement. And we'd listen, my mom and I, oh yeah, he's playing such and such song, or oh, he's doing the standards, or he's practicing a new riff. So I'd creep down there and I'd sort of just watch him play, and he'd just have a sort of knowing smile on his face, and he'd do his thing. And every once in a while he'd throw me a couple of chords. You know what a major seventh is? You ever seen this? And then he'd go back to his thing. So I had the chance to sort of absorb as much or as little of it as I wanted. And he never forced it on me, but it came, naturally. I couldn't help but just be fascinated by this incredible talent. And also listening to those moments it was sort of, like anticlimactic, because I always thought he's such a great guitarist. He could have been,
Yeah.
like a great himself. But I don't know. It wasn't in the cards for him. So I
Yeah.
kind of feel when I hang these guitars on my wall, like, is a little bit of a legacy that I'm carrying on, and sort of trying to not make that same mistake, because even though he was a great man, he's still a hero for me. And he's long passed away since year 2000. He passed on. But I still every day think, a little bit of what I do is for the old man, right?
That's nice. I like that. Um, a couple of things. One, my dad played the guitar too, and um, I, I like all of us, I have regrets, right? But I often think that if I could go back in time, I would whisper to that 10, 11, 12-year-old Jesse that, you know, go to your dad and say, "Hey, show me how to play the guitar."
Yeah.
Use that to bond. But I was a kid who loved reading, into comic books and sci-fi. And while I liked music, I never really thought about the guitar. The few times I tried, your fingers hurt because it's metal strings back then. And I think back that if I had shown a little more interest, he probably would have been patient and worked with me, and we could have bound on that. So I'm glad that you have that memory with you and your father. That's beautiful.
Well, I mean, listen, for the record, I mean, like, you talk about having being preoccupied with sci-fi and whatnot. I'm also a huge Trekkie. I mean,
Yeah.
Trekkie. There's a lot of schools of thought
Yeah.
there, depending on who you're talking to. I know every episode by heart, and Next Generation, Voyager, all of that. I mean, I
Yeah.
also had this huge distraction
Yeah.
of role-playing games and video games, and for many years in my life, I was a video game producer. I worked for an independent game developer, and I had to give up the music. And
Hmm.
at that moment where I was at my busiest, and I had a team of developers, and we were sort of, working. I'd keep them late, and we were working 7 nights a week.
Hmm.
But I thought, am I missing out on the music? Am I supposed to be doing music? Even then, I mean, it was more than a distraction. It was a huge passion. It was a huge
Yeah.
passion. I still got the video game boxes. I mean, remember when they used to sell them in the big
Yes,
boxes? I still
absolutely.
get a bunch of them, my little medals of honor, worked on this one, voices
Yes.
on this or whatever. And at that time, when I was probably at my happiest career wise, because it was such a fun job, I always thought to myself, should I be doing more music? And just a quick anecdote, there was this
Yeah.
fellow that I used to play many, many years ago in a disco band with. Shout out to a buddy of mine named Steve Bucci. He's probably not going to watch this because he's not online, but one of the best R&B disco funk drummers
Hmm.
in all of Montreal. And he's still plays to this day. I mean, wrinkles and age aside, he still plays like he's a kid. And he used to call me during those days, and he'd call me up and say, "Hey, Tebow, yeah, you're busy, eh? You're working hard, yeah, yeah. You know what? We miss you, man. The music business misses you." And he was always there shouting it out, just calling it out to say, just to poke me. And it's like, don't forget, man, we're musicians and we're here and we want you back. And I'm
Oh,
like,
that's
wow, I
lovely.
don't know what to do, man. I don't know what to do. And eventually, I mean, I never went back during those days, but
Hmm.
I did reconnect with him at one point. And sure enough, he is.
The what made me think of a story. Once again, my brother-in-law Ralph told the story that a couple of the people he were in band with continued playing, and so they would do cover bands, weddings, high school reunions, different things. And it worked out where they're like, hey, we need a drummer. Do you want to come play with us? You know? And Ralph's like, yeah, I would. And, and there were a couple things they'd start talking, and Ralph would be like, just tell me how it goes. But he said it was the weirdest thing because he had only ever played in a band with buddies. And like, all of a sudden it was a job to them. Like, okay, let's set up. Then after the gig, okay, let's break down and go because I got to go home to my kids. And he was used to, all his buddies. It was a social event. And oh yeah, we may have made $50, but that wasn't the deal. The really deal was just being to play with your buddies. By the way, fun story. Ralph says this day. My father-in-law, my wife's dad, and Ralph's dad made him file taxes on the bucks he made as a high school band. He said, I'm the only kid in America that was reporting to my taxes the $50 I made at a gig. So
that's a book right there. That's so honorable. That's rare.
Isn't it? Yes. He said that was Ray Carroll. And Ray would go and he work the lights for him, and so that was great.
Man, if you would have mentioned social insurance number, right? I mean, to any musician, right? Whoa, like they scatter.
No, exactly right.
I don't want the gig, man. Sorry.
No, that's okay. Yeah.
I'll talk to you later.
Yeah. So, when so you're getting in your teenage years, you're getting in high school. What music started speaking to you? What kind of?
I always loved the drums. And in my head, when I was a kid, I was 14, 15-year-old kid. And I had learned a little bit of guitar and always had some guitars lying around. So it was kind of easy to pick up. But I had this thing. I'd always be drumming out a beat with my fingers. And I thought, I gotta get this out of my system. There's something here. Now, I don't know if I'm going to be any good at it. So I used to rent drum kits from our local music store. And I was still living with my folks back then, of course. I was a teenager and working for the family business. So I'd come home every once in a while with this drum set. I rent it for a day, and then it became a weekend. And then I rent them for a month. And thankfully, my parents didn't shoot me. I mean, they said, yeah, okay, all right. So it's a weekend, right? Like, yeah, boom, bah, boom. And I always thought, I'm going to be a drummer. I'm going to keep practicing this. I save up my money and buy the kit. And one day I'm bringing back the rental drum kit to my local music store, and I see a little paper on the counter, band seeking, right? And it said band seeking singer. And at one of these, ad hoc rehearsals, if you want to call it, I had invited just a couple of local dudes. It's like, hey, do you own a guitar? Not do you play? Do you own a guitar? Do you own a bass? Yeah, I think my dad has my brother, I won't tell him. I'll just bring it over, And someone wanted to do Zeppelin. And the guy who owned the microphone never showed up. I had this crappy, sort of Radio Shack mic or whatever. Back in the day, Radio Shack.
Yeah.
And they said, why don't you sing? And I'm like, I can't sing. What are you talking about? And so I started singing the Zeppelin, and it was rock and roll, right? And I didn't know I had the falsetto to get up there. And the guys are like, it's the first time someone gets up and claps for you. You never forget that, right? It's such an amazing feeling. And they weren't clapping, but they were saying, whoa, dude, forget the drums, man. You should sing. I'm like, really? So, of course, young, easily influenced teenager. I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna do singing. And so when I brought back the drum kit and I saw the ad that said band looking for singer, I called them up. And there was this fellow from the other end of town, east end of town. And the way Montreal works, it's an island that as the west end, if you want, is sort of like the residential bedroom community. And then the east end is the gritty urban, lots of different cultural influences, lots of Italians and Hungarians and Greeks and really passionate people. And so this is where the ad was from. This fellow, Steve, had come all the way from the East End to the West Island of Montreal, put a tag on a music store thinking, I'm going to find this guy, this English singer from West Island. He's going to come and sing for my band. And sure enough, that's what I did. And I ended up going every 4 nights a week, driving to the East End, learning how to swear in Italian, how to eat prosciutto, how to dry out tomatoes and make homemade wine. And that's where it all started. I was a singer. from that point on, and it just never stopped, never looked back.
That is great. So, you mentioned about your, your day job started taking over, right? You're doing programming, you're working on games. Did you every once in a while bring the guitar out and play a gig with some buddies on a weekend, or was it almost you flipped a switch? You were focused on this and just missing the music.
There was a sort of an interesting, I guess, chain of events that happened, and the family business had done well enough that construction we were doing great. We were very busy. I had just started to play music, and just a twist of fate, the construction industry in our region at that time, we're talking about 90s, and so the industry tanked, and my dad, he had no choice. He came up and said, a frank conversation with you, man, I can't afford to keep you on. You're going to have to go and get yourself some other work. And I'm sorry, that's just the way it is. And so I stayed on working for him every once in a while, but I had to go and find work somewhere else. And through a series of crappy jobs, and not really sure if I wanted to stay in construction anyhow, although it was great experience, I thought, what am I going to do? If I'm going to make a living, I got to be able to afford to pay for guitar strings and drumsticks,
Sure,
all these things that I love. So what am I going to do? So eventually ended up going back to school to learn how to, technology, computer programming and whatnot. And that's what got me into the video game industry. But I always had a connection with the music. And because I'm a passionate French Canadian, and I don't always follow my brain. I usually follow my heart, jumping in before I think about it. And I didn't really think about how consuming my job would be when I found a job that I loved. And that's why I mentioned my buddy Steve Bucci calling me, hey man, don't forget. And it was that sort of reminder, and watching my professional surroundings become so just crazy that I realized that I was on the verge of a professional burnout. And sure enough, that's what happened. I had to take a break. I had to take a step back from all of that. And even though it was my dream career, so I thought, I had to stop. And it was all of that crazy sort of crescendo events that I would say the early 2000s, 2003 or so, that's when I'm like, I have to double down and make music a real significant part of my life. And similar to what I'm doing now, the guitars came out, and it's the same hooks actually that I kept from those days. I bought them so that I could put them on the wall and have a guitar in every room. And that's exactly what I did. I started my own company. I did a little multimedia production company where I was still connected to the video game industry. I was doing voiceover recording and localization work and translation services for international video game developers that wanted to distribute their products in North America. So I had a nice little niche going, and it was pretty lucrative stuff. And I managed to travel a little bit with that as well, until I started to realize, like, I'm accumulating microphones and recording equipment here. And it transitioned. It became a project studio. And that's where my real music career, if you want to call it, sort of took a very positive turn. And then I fell in love and I chose it's not the right path. I'm doing the quote marks in the air for your audio viewers. The right path, I thought, I gotta leave the music. I gotta do the job, pay the rent, and do that for my kids. It has turned out for the best, because that has led me to where I am today. I'm a system administrator for a large group company. And, is it my passionate job? Definitely not. But, you do things, you suck it up. You're a family man, you're a dad, you get it. You do what you have to do. And doing the work, never been afraid of doing the work, but finding that balance of work and passion. And am I doing the same thing as my dad and so many other artists and creators that, like, leaving their passion to do what they think is right? I don't know, man. It's just it's taken me a long time to figure out that you gotta it's a responsibility, I think. And when I accepted the responsibility of being a musician and forcing myself to work hard at sharing my creativity and passion with others, whether they're artists or not, that's when it really started to make sense. And like I told my kids, one day I'm going to grow up and figure it all out. It's going to happen.
Well,
Probably when I'm 136.
so Paul, I have a good friend whose name's Sarah Hickman, and she's now retired from the music industry. But when she was young and starting out, she quit her day job because she was focused on just going to do music. And she ended up getting signed with Elektra, had an album, couple albums, didn't do as well, but she's ended up easy a dozen albums from different. She's produced her music, and she's had a good career. She talked about she was Texas Musician of the Year a few years ago, and so she's done well. But back in those early days, she'd talk about she had the money to pay the electricity bill, so she just went 4 days without electricity.
Yeah.
She just, because she was committed. And I often think about that. When are you, what's the difference between passion and believing in the dream, or pursuing something that you need to let go?
Yeah.
Right? Like, and I think only you have to decide that yourself, right? And it does matter when you when you're married, or even after you're married and you have kids, and you're helping to raise them, and the responsibility of being not only financially but a good role model and teaching kids, but you also don't want to teach the kids giving up your dreams, right, and go safe. And so I think that's all just part of what makes life hard and
Agreed.
interesting.
I agree. I mean, to that note, I mean, there's, my the mother of my children and I are separated now, but the thing is that we're best friends, we're best buddies, and we didn't know how it was going to turn out when we parted ways. It's been a while now. It's been almost 2 years now. We had no idea what to expect because there were so many emotions at the time. We were at a point where we were sort of living in a multi-generational home. We had taken in some of our elderly family members to live with us. And so splitting up meant not only just her and I moving apart to different addresses and breaking it to our kids. That was such a fucking heartbreaking moment, telling the kids, they're crying, and it was horrendous experience. And then we had to tell, grandma and great aunt, sorry, this beautiful multi-generational home with your walkout backyard is bye-bye. I mean, this was the reality of our situation. We knew we had to break all of that. It wasn't easy, and we had to choose the hard path because we knew we didn't want to continue showing our kids that it's okay to stay in different bedrooms and to sort of tolerate this elephant in the room every single day. We wanted to teach them that everyone deserves to be happy. We didn't fight. We were I mean, fortunate or not, I don't know if fortunate's the right word. We did what was right for us, I guess, first, but also for everybody else around us, because everyone was miserable. Everyone in the whole family was just like, wow, this is life. And we had to show them, like, no. And after a year of recovery and all that, they came over for Christmas dinner, the whole gang. We had the best time. We celebrate birthdays together. We take the co-parenting very seriously. My oldest daughter is type 1 diabetes, juvenile diabetes. We did a fundraiser together. The mom ran like 80 kilometers on her treadmill to raise money. I was out there pushing the promotion. We support each other, and we do what we have to do. But getting to that point where you're about to make the decision to basically F up everyone's life, it's, I mean, and we're not the only ones to do it. We're not great because we did it. I just think that more people need to be honest about paying attention to what makes them happy, or if it's starting off with paying attention to what's making you miserable and understanding why, and then finding out what's going to make you happy. But it all comes as soon as you make the hard decision, and it's all about truth. If you're being honest, then that misery never happens.
You know, one of my best friends had been married multiple years, and they had two sons, both intellectually, like one of them very autistic, one of them only mildly autistic. So two special needs sons, two, years of financial stress. And so they reached the point where, she said to him, "I love you, but I'm not in love with you anymore. And I think we need to, end the marriage." And, he said, "Okay, I agree. I'm, and he had talked to me. He says, I was willing to do counseling, but when she said that, I knew she was right."
Yeah.
So, and like a year later, it was Christmas, and he was there with his new girlfriend, who later became his wife, her kids, their kids together, his ex-wife, her new husband, and his kids, all on one pew at church.
That's awesome.
Right?
I love that.
And
Love that.
and when she got married, they were there at the wedding because, and his new wife and his old wife talk about, we're sisters. We just, and I think that's the way it should be. It isn't always the way it is. No. And I know that, but that is what the goal should be. Because happily ever after means different things. I was just thinking, and I talked about this on Twitter. Someone asked me about the river, and I'm going to get this wrong, but he said the line, and I think tan and wet down at the reservoir. And someone says, are they talking about the river or her body is wet? Right. And I said, well, I think it's both. But I said, I'm going to ask you the question again. Do you think the couple in the river in the song, would they say it's a good marriage? Now, in reality, Bruce wrote this song for his sister. His sister is still married to the guy who got her pregnant. They have had a very successful marriage and happy marriage. And I said, do you think the couple in the song, if you ask them, was it a good marriage? And my answer is probably yes. It isn't exactly what he thought it would be, and it isn't exactly what she thought it would be, but they're still together. They're still making it work. So I think happily ever after is different for everyone.
Agreed 100%. And listen, the whole notion of happiness, everyone's got different varying degrees of what makes them happy. And if it's something, people talk about how in a relationship, whether it's a marriage or otherwise, it often comes down to what can one do for the other every day, every single day. And sometimes you don't always know what you bring to a relationship until shit happens, things break and things go wrong, until you realize, oh, here, I have this tool set that I didn't know about,
right.
To be able to help someone recover from something traumatic. Or if, you're talking about parents of autistic children. There's so many different things that we don't know that we're built for something until maybe it happens. And then we're like, oh yeah, this is my lot. I have to take this responsibility and take care of this. And maybe, that doesn't bring happiness, but the constant struggle of meeting those responsibilities and finally resolving it and coming. I have a close friend of mine, Enzo, is one of my musical buddies who has an autistic child. And we've reconnected in the past few years musically, and we're collaborating as well. And he is probably one of the strongest guys I've ever met, because he's just constantly there, and his wife, and they are making it so just as easy as possible for this teenage autistic boy to be safe, comfortable, and happy, despite all of the challenges. And anyone that's ever dealt with the world of autism knows that it's challenging for every single person involved. And I see in their what they're willing to share with the world on Facebook and whatnot, I see that there he is, the autistic teenager playing music and smiling, or he's enjoying a meal and hugging his little brother. And that's because of 15 years of freaking hard work.
Yes.
Was the challenge making them happy? No way. But watching that's a different form of happiness. Now, to switch it over, I want to talk about a couple of friends of mine who are huge Bruce Springsteen fans. So when I got married, the best man at my wedding was a fellow named Tom. And Tom and I grew up. We've been friends since beginning of high school, middle school, right? So we grew up together. We know everything about each other. And we're the type of friends that we don't have to stay in touch to check on each other every day. We don't have to talk for a year and a half and go by, and we could just, jump into a bottle of scotch and catch up and have the best time ever. And he's been happily married, forever. And there was a time in his life when he started talking to me about Bruce. And I'm like, well, yeah, I like Bruce Springsteen. He goes, no, man. I'm talking about, you got to come to see a show. This is like, it's religion, man. And I'm like, okay, Tom, listen, I know you know me, buddy. Come on. It's good, right? But yeah, how good is he? He goes, oh, tailgate parties. I'm going to another show. This is my 5th show this year. This is crazy. I'm going with my 3 brother-in-laws. We're doing it, man. We're going down to the next show. You want to come? You got to be kidding me. And there's a man who I respect enormously. He is such a huge, huge family guy and upstanding person. And he's a teacher. And I just have so much respect for him. And he was the one who got me into single malt whiskey and Bruce Springsteen. And I was like, what the hell? I don't get it. This is when I was younger and he was starting to go to all these shows. And I'm like, I don't get it. What is it that draws you? At this point, I had pretty much gotten back into music on a very regular basis. I was playing 4 or 5 nights a week in cover bands. And I told the boys, I said, we got to do more Bruce. Tom likes Bruce. Tom's been one of my biggest fans ever since we were kids. We got to do some more Bruce. Like, just throw it in the set list. Oh, yeah, okay. I mean, we were doing hundreds of different songs from all different genres. So, Hungry Heart and all these things started to creep in. The typical cover songs that you get involved with. And I might be skipping ahead here. I'm totally messing up.
No, you're good. No, you're great.
You told me about, you said, listen to the song Thunder Road. Read the lyrics, answer the question.
Right.
Does Mary get in the car?
Right.
And when I saw this question, and I'm sorry to jump to the end if you were saving
that's okay.
something, but you talked about the river, and I'm like, I got to talk about this. Thunder Road is probably one of the songs by Bruce that I know the best, and the reason is because of Tom. We added this to the set list because he came up to me one night. He came to all my shows whenever he could, and he came up to me one night. He goes, "You got to do Thunder Road, man. Do Thunder Road for me." And he had a look in his eye that I've been to the shows. I've been in front of the man. And you, Tebow, have to do Thunder Road. I'm like, all right, man. Done. So the next show, we did a half-ass version because it wasn't great. It wasn't very well rehearsed. And our bands at one point, we were doing a lot of Irish pubs, this kind of gig where you're stripping down the band to the bare bones. We had a percussionist on djembe drum, my main guitarist, a fellow named Zoe, and myself. That was it, just 3 guys. So a percussive drum, an acoustic guitar, and I played a little bit of rhythm, but I was the vocalist, right? And we would save Thunder Road for the finale of almost every one of our good shows when the people were out and there was a vibe in the room, and we'd save that. And the funniest thing would happen every single time we played that, there were sort of 2 different kinds of listeners. The ones that didn't know Bruce, they'd start off listening like, "What? That's not Freebird. What is this? This is not, Allman Brothers. What is this?" And as it would go, it would progress. You'd see, and they'd be looking around at these other half of the room, your landscapers and your construction guys and your hard work, and they come in as 10, really soft spoken and just they're passionate about it and they're into it. And at the end of the song, they're standing. It's the first time they've been standing all night, and they're just, practically tears in their eyes. And that was when I understood, it's not just about the song. It's about there's so much about him, about his story and his music and all the things that happen. It's truly one of the most incredible experiences ever. So I have Tom to thank for meeting you pretty much, because
Yeah.
that's the way that the whole
Now,
trail went.
did you ever go see him and perform?
I never got to see him live. I never got
Wow.
to see him live. And I say got to, not because it's like, I just would have wished that I would have seen him when I'm watching the videos
Yeah.
and I see young Bruce. So I never
Yeah.
got to see young Bruce. And so I'm catching up after years of missed opportunities. And that's one of the reasons why I did the cover. And I didn't want to do an obvious cover. That's why I did New York City Serenade, because I don't want to do, you know, like another version of every other song that's been done.
Yeah, so you're already started, but go down the path right now. Back up just a little bit. When did you decide to start a YouTube channel, and what was your thought process when you started doing this?
Jeez. So when my ex and I were living in this multi-generational home, having a blast. I mean, we were sort of living in this great big house in the West Island of Montreal, and taking care of some old people, raising some kids. For all intents and purposes, life was awesome. Life was perfect, right? And the beginnings of things just are sort of not feeling quite right. But we weren't onto it yet. We were still just, you know, going day by day. And I thought, I want to do a YouTube channel. And they all thought I was crazy, but very supportive. And you know, I'm like, yeah, I'm going to do a cooking channel. I'm going to cook on YouTube. So I did that, and it had some moderate success, and I got some followers, and it was sort of like a stepping stone. It was a segue, because I thought, well, what if I, you know, do the same thing but for music? And I was still in my head. I had given up on doing the bands, and I wasn't doing live shows anymore, but I had all the gear. And I thought, what if I did a music thing? And I was so uncertain of myself as an artist that it showed when I would do videos about music. So I stuck to the cooking. I was really good at that. And I was getting lots of hits, lots of views. I'm like, oh, I'll do another recipe and this and that, and allergen friendly. And I was getting into all kinds of niche stuff. And then it occurred to me, like, I gotta really just think about this here. I'm spending lots of money on ingredients. I'm spending tons of time making videos. I'm getting tired, and I had a burnout. So I knew the warning signs to watch out for. Of course, I'm still doing my day job and all that, and I was becoming a content creator. I'm like, oh no, I don't want to burn out because of fucking YouTube. You know what I mean? Like, that's not the way it's going to happen. So I told myself, I'm like, okay, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do something that I'm passionate about. And then the breakup happened. So took a hiatus from any kind of online content. And when I got this new place, and we had discovered that we could be excellent co-parents and still raise a family and happy and healthy and all that, I had some time for me. I had some time to think about, oh, how am I going to spend my free time? I renovated the hell out of this place, and made a project studio. First thing I did is I cut a hole in the wall between the two basement storage rooms. Like, that's going to be the sound room. That's going to be the master desk. It's like the whole experience of my life had finally come full circle.
Yeah, because you'd worked construction, right? As a kid, you'd worked construction, so you knew that. You knew, you know, so you're like, okay, I know what I need to do, and so good. Okay, that's cool.
And that's where the YouTube channel for Tebovision, and I was torn because I thought I'd done so many brands. You know, I'm the kind of guy where if I have an idea, I'll make a website and a YouTube channel and an Instagram account, and I'm on it. But I had 5 or 6 of those going, and I'm like, how do I consolidate that? And I mean, I stumbled on a Gary V video, and he spoke to me very much, like, directly to me, even though, I mean, you know, it was just some random video about, don't listen to negativity, get out there, do your content. And I took it to heart, and I'm like, what? He's onto something. And that's when I realized I can be Tebow and record my music, cook if I want to, play video games if I want to, talk about co-parenting and, you know, people struggling with divorce and separation if I want to, talk about my friends who have autistic kids if I want to, talk about Bruce Springsteen if I want to. And it all occurred to me that just instead of doing Tebow music, Tebow cooking, just Tebovision. And that's why Tebovision is called what it is. That's the brand that I went with.
I love that.
It's, you know, when I decided to get back in shape too and start running, I didn't want to have a separate channel to show people that you get off your ass and go run if you want to or not. It's okay. don't beat yourself up, basically, is what it's all about. And so I go out and I run and I tell jokes and I do dad jokes on Tebovision. So it's not just a music channel. It's mostly about my music, but there's a lot going on. And I just want to share myself and be who I am without feeling like I have to be a certain flavor of what I'm passionate about. It's just everything goes.
Well, I'm going to go back to New York Serenade in a minute, but one of the nicest compliments I got a few months ago is someone who is a regular listener to my Doctor Who podcast said, I kept picking at him. I like, you never listen to Set Listing Bruce? He goes, I'm not really a Bruce Springsteen fan. And I'm like, oh, you should join me anyway. And he says, oh, okay, let me listen to a couple episodes. And he came back and he said, I don't know if your podcast is about Bruce Springsteen or is it just you a podcast where the host loves Springsteen and he just likes talking to people. And I said, I'll do that, because when I'm looking for guests, I'll say, yes, it's a Bruce Springsteen podcast, but if you're passionate about the Bee Gees, if you're passionate about soul music, if you have a book to produce, if you're a musician, I just want to have you on the show because I love talking to people. So I love that. And if I thought back, maybe I'd find a different, more general, title for the podcast.
Well, that'd be a fun episode one day. If ever you want to do an episode just on branding and people's thoughts of branding, you got to get some people more knowledgeable than me. But I would love to be part of that show. That would be very interesting.
You're right. All right. So you've done different covers, and so go through your process. And you said you knew you wanted to do a Bruce cover. I'll take it from there. Go from there.
Well, okay. I mean, I did when Tebovision was up and running, and I realized that I was on to finally the final brand I will ever own. I don't have to change next month or next year and become something different. It's just me. And being honest about who I was or am was tough. Like I suppose that I started off doing videos thinking it has to be perfect, and I gotta, even whether it was cooking or music or anything, I'm like, it has to be perfect. And I would redo takes just so that it wasn't like I didn't stutter or I didn't say the wrong word. Or it's okay to make mistakes. And that's when it started to like, oh yeah, I was worried about doing covers of anybody because it wasn't going to be perfect.
Right.
So when I got over that, I got over myself, and I'm like, come on, Tebow, just do the cover, man. You did covers for 20 years. Like, what the hell's wrong? Right. Now you're not going to do it on video? Like, I mean, you can reach so many more people, from all over the world. Just do it. So that struggle of me, myself, and I finally came to a head when I did an Eagles cover, Take It Easy. And it immediately got copyright blacklisted on my YouTube channel. I got a copyright strike. And I'm like, oh, no. And it was an epic version. It was like good. And I'm like, oh. So I took it down, of course, because I don't want to get in the bad with YouTube. And I talked to some friends, and they were like, yeah, Don Henley, man, he's got a whole team of people that are just constantly roving the internet to make sure that there's no, illegitimate covers of his stuff. I'm like, is that true? And sure enough, I found out that it was. I was watching a Rick Beato video. He's a fellow on YouTube who's a very experienced music producer. I had a lot to learn from him. And it happened in one of his videos where he mentioned that. And I'm like, it's true. It's not me. It's not like if I do every cover is going to get blacklisted. And that's when I started thinking, well, if I do slightly more obscure covers, it was self-serving at first. I thought, I'm going to do this song by Tom Petty, this song by, Townes Van Zandt, or like weird stuff. And I'm like, and I kept coming back to Bruce. I'm like, no, I'm not ready. I'm not ready to pick the Bruce song. Like, even though I was being honest and just like out there and putting it out, whether it sucked or it was good, I'm like, no, I still have some reverence for Bruce. I got to pick the right song. What's it going to be? Fuck, I don't know what to do. And then I went, like, I spent the whole night just listening to Bruce. And of course that night, because how can you not be in a good mood just listening to video after video of this epic guy? And that's when I heard New York City Serenade. And I had heard it before, but I didn't really listen. And I'm like, this is great. This is the one. I'm going to do this song. And regardless of the tempo change and all that, because if you're a recording guy, click track, right? It's got to be, and you got to be able to know the chords and all this stuff. A lot of little rules that you make for yourself before jumping into a song. And I'm like, you know what? Screw it. I gotta pay tribute. And that's what these covers are. It's my way of paying tribute to these epic songwriters. And I always put that hashtag in there, epic songwriter. I don't care if it's a popular hashtag or not. It's just because that's what it is to me. Yeah. These are epic songwriters that need to be like paid tribute to in a way, as opposed to just covering a popular song. And I try and avoid the most popular ones, but sometimes it's the temptation's too strong. You just got to do it. I've played all these covers live. So, I mean, I don't worry about learning them or worried about, performing them. It's just, I want to pay tribute to the right people and the right songs in their repertoire. Usually the earlier stuff is the best.
Absolutely. Well, I think it came out great.
Thank you.
Were you happy with it?
I was happy that I finally did a Bruce cover on my YouTube channel. I mean, I had done plenty in the bands. I mean, I played a whole bunch of them. We had a huge repertoire, including many, many Bruce songs, but this is the first time that I've covered one on my channel. And I would say that for sure I could have done better, for sure. And I always feel that about anything that I put out, whether it's a dad joke or a cover song or a behind the scenes. I always know that I could do better, but that's why I do content, is because I want to get better. And that's when I started doing my series of Watch Me Grow. That's a popular hashtag on TikTok. So I just adopted it, and I'm like playing piano, learning new chords on the guitar, slap bass, drums, little paradiddles and rudiments. And I'm sharing that to show people, I suck at this, and I'm going to practice it, and I'm going to get better.
Another good friend of mine is a guy named Tom Zoller. He's been on the podcast a couple of times. He he's an artist, and he by the way, one of his most popular comic strips are Love and Capes. It's a superhero sitcom, and right now he's doing a version of set in his world with COVID-19 and how it affects the people in his world. He's a brilliant artist and a great guy, but he's always talked about he'll never get a tattoo because he knows it would have to be art he drew, and there's never been anything he drew that 6 months later he wasn't disappointed in and wants to redo it. And so
that's such a great analogy,
right? Like he says, I could never get a tattoo because it would have to be mine, and I know I would not be happy with it when it gets over. So that's good. What are other songs you're percolating on?
I go to this site frequently called Music Map, I think is the name. I don't know the exact address. And it's great because you can enter the name of a band. You enter Bruce Springsteen, and it shows you artists like that search term. Other artists that share something in common, musically or whatever. And that's a good resource for me because it introduces me to musicians that I know the name, but I don't really know their stuff. I did a Joe Jackson cover that I heard a million years ago, and I totally forgot about it. I'm like, I love this song. And the only reason I did Joe Jackson's because of that Music Map. I started with Van Morrison or something like that, and it led me down this road. Another thing that helps me too is when I go, I always go on Wikipedia, as we all do, to learn about, new stuff. And when I go to a band or a song or a group, I always like to try and find out, especially if it's a group, who was the real songwriter in the band.
Right.
And Wikipedia is great for that because it'll tell you the name of the song, and you click the link and it'll tell you who actually wrote the damn thing.
Right.
And so, for instance, someone, I don't know, was it Phil Collins, or I can't remember whose page I was on, only to discover that a song that I was so happy about, I thought this is going to be a song that I do, wasn't written by them at all. I'm like, oh, well, then it's not going to be on my list because I don't want to pay tribute to someone covering it. I'm the one covering it.
Exactly.
I want to pay tribute to the songwriter. That's the whole point of that segment of my show. So it's really about trying to find the perfect mix between slightly undiscovered country song-wise, because it's not the ultimate ultimate hit. I'm just trying to Sound smart there. It's not
No.
about their greatest hit. And it's also has to be written by them, not by some unknown artist. And sometimes I discover an unknown to me songwriter, producer, artist, and so was from Great Britain and moved to Texas and became a huge guitarist and fan of Stevie Ray. I'm like, oh, that's awesome. I'm going to cover one of his songs. Then I got to also keep in mind, if no one's ever heard of it, well, maybe it's not the best song to cover, but if it's that good, then for sure. One of the first songs I ever covered was Marty Robbins, El Paso.
Yeah.
And I love that song, always loved it. But I never did it with my cover bands because I thought it's too cheesy to do a cover of Marty Robbins. And I thought, now in these days, older Tebow, I'm like, no, it's not cheesy. You just have to do it the right way.
Embrace it. Yeah.
And that's when I'm starting to realize, like, you gotta be, if you're gonna be an artist, you can't just do what's right. You gotta do you. And I'm learning that every single day. I'm having a difficult time on certain days, and on other days it just flows like water. It depends on the week.
So Tebow, how about your own music? What do you said you're working, you're collaborating with other artists. Talk a little bit about your own music. Okay. Yeah, we froze up a little bit. Talk about Tebow. Talk about your own music. You were mentioning that you are working on with other artists and other writers. Talk about your own music.
Well, like I told you, I always wanted to be a drummer when I was a younger man, and decided that one of the first things I did in this project studio would be to put in a drum kit in a drum room. And sure enough, that fellow that I talked about at the beginning of this show, Steve Cefaloni, my drummer friend from the East End of Montreal, he was the drummer of that very first cover band that I was a part of back in the day. And he still plays drums today. And he has dabbled recently in the art of crafting drums. And so on a very impassioned, wine-soaked and booze-soaked Zoom call early in pandemic, or just before pandemic, actually, we all just joked at the idea of Steve building me a drum kit. Mm-hmm. And sure enough, he did it. And from scratch, he built me a custom, small, simple, not the most expensive or elaborate parts, but certainly better than anything that I would be buying with my budget. So of course I paid him for it, and he gave me a killer price. He says, listen, I'm going to charge you for the parts, a little bit of labor, because it took me some time. I'm like, hey, dude, you built me a freaking drum kit. Yeah, of course I'm going to pay you. So I scrounged stuff, sold a kidney, and paid him because you got to respect that. So that was the first piece of the project studio. And then of course my dad's guitars and a few of my own and the bass. And so I decided that, I have no more excuses. I'm going to be a multi-instrumentalist. In my years preceding Tebovision, I discovered Jacob Collier, who is an incredibly talented young man who is a multi-instrumentalist, but to the most epic degree. He is pitch perfect, plays everything like flawlessly, everything, all 153 instruments that he owns. One of the best musicians I've ever experienced or seen or listened to. And I thought in some small way, I'm going to pay tribute to that, because I do play drums and bass and guitar, and I don't want to feel like I'm showing off. I just want to have fun doing what I love. And that's when I started to realize I have to practice. I suck at drums. I suck at lead guitar. I suck at backup vocals. So I'm like, well, stop making excuses. Just practice, do it. And that's where I started writing songs. I think it's Ed Sheeran that I saw an interview with him. He pointed out, he says, your first song is like, it's going to suck. It's like pancakes. The first one's never good. Yeah. And you just have to keep at it. He says your 100th song is going to be epic. And I'm like, yeah, I like that. Ticket. So I started writing, knowing full well that this one's going to suck, but I'm going to have so much fun playing it. I'm going to do it. And it turns out that now I'm writing songs that I'm actually proud of. And like your tattoo friend, in 6 months, it's going to be crap. But right now,
that's good. That's good.
So I'm slowly creating a repertoire of 24 original songs in a project that I'm doing to sort of have one song for each hour of the 24-hour cycle.
Oh, nice.
And it's kind of starts at midnight in the pub with a Celtic rocker that I call Pretty Shannon. And it's about just a bunch of guys, you know, that are in the pub, and they're all joking about the protagonist who falls in love with someone way out of his league, Pretty Shannon. And sure enough, he gets the girl. Got to tell a happy ending, because that's the way you start a good story.
Yeah.
And then it leads into some more sort of psychedelic stuff, Pink Floyd influenced, you know, sort of a little bit the dreamscape of the 1 a.m., 2 a.m., 3 a.m. So all my behind the scenes are going into detail about how I'm coming up with these songs and how I'm approaching the writing process and all the different parts. I wrote a song for the 1 a.m. It's called, I can't remember the name of it. It's called Before We Go. So it's about having one more before we go, and a bunch of promises that we're never going to, you know, do the plans that we came up with when you're in a drunken stupor. And one of the behind the scenes that I did, I'm just laughing. I couldn't stop laughing, because I thought, what a better way to end the song than with a bunch of rowdy drunks leaving the bar.
Yeah.
So I'm recording me being drunk and disorderly, so that I can have this outro of the song. So anyway, that's the nature of the project I'm on right now.
Is it available now, or are you still working on it?
Yeah, well, all these no songs are released yet, but now is when it begins. Starting, I think, as early as February is when I'm going to be actually publishing the songs, and I'm still sort of figuring out how that all works, because I want to make sure that it's not really about selling the songs. I just want them to be available so people can listen to them and consume them and enjoy them, and putting video with those songs. So it's gonna be on the YouTube channel and, you know, Spotify and iTunes and all that, but they're not available yet. They're coming soon.
So listeners, to pull the curtain back, it's January 11th as we're recording this, and I usually have 3 or 4 weeks in advance, so this will probably be out in February. But I'm going to put you on the spot now. All right, Tebow, when you're ready to release it, you got to come back, and we'll do an episode just talking about that and to help promote it. How's that sound?
Jesse, man, if it wasn't for pandemic and the fact that you're in Texas and I'm in Montreal, I would totally give you a hug right now, bro. That is awesome. I will thank you, and I'm humbled, and I appreciate that. I will definitely take you up on that offer.
That sounds great. All right, what should I have asked you that I didn't?
You said to me, "Does Mary get in the car at the end of the song?"
That's before we get to that, is there anything else? Is there any other stories, or you want to save some for the next time we visit?
More about you, because I'm definitely genuinely curious to know more about Mr. Jesse.
Okay.
I find that you're a fascinating guy, and but I know that that's not the nature of the show.
Well, you know what? Anytime you want, you can come on and you can ask me questions.
Well, I might have to ask if I can interview you at one point. I don't know how you'd be.
I'd love that
if you have time, but
I'd love that. That would be a lot of fun. Yeah, that'd be a lot of fun. You know, my buddy Bob did that. He assumed the juxtaposition, and the premise is he has a guest come on, but they become the host, and they talk about whatever they want. So yes, I would love that. If you want to interview me sometime, we can do that. I would be honored. 100%. All right, so we've already got 2 more episodes planned. You're going to come back and interview me, and then we're going to talk about the cycle. The 24-hour song.
Sounds like a blast, man. I'm all over that. I love it.
All right, and we have gone over an hour, as I promised you we would. Every time I have someone, I love it. No, this is great.
Past midnight for you. We're already now Tuesday, bro.
No, we're great. All right, yes. Let me give the background for those of you who may have never heard the show. Jay Armstrong is an honors English teacher in the Philadelphia area. He just recently retired, but before he retired, every year they would take Thunder Road and break it apart as a poem. His seniors would go through all the lyrics. They would go through the imagery. They would compare it to Robert Frost's The Road Not Taken. They would go through every twist and turn. At the end of the class, he would ask the question, does Mary get in the car? So Tebow, that is your question. Does Mary get in the car?
After seeing the faces on all of those drunken pub goers on those many nights doing covers and playing that song as the finale of our show, and watching the impassioned energy and hope, always wished, and as I was singing the lyric, always wished, yes, she would definitely get in the car. But she gets in the car, and then it segues right into the river.
Yes.
That's where the story goes. It's never a happy ending.
I think that is a fair ending, and I think that's a fair answer. All right, Tebow. tell us how to find you if we want to, if people want to hear your music, if they want to reach you, what's the best way?
The best place I would send people is the tebovision.com, Tebo vision.com. All of the stuff that has to do with my various interests is there, but it's definitely got links on the homepage to all my social media. So anyone who's into Facebook or Twitter or TikTok or Instagram or even, LinkedIn, they'll be able to find the right link to get in touch with you there. And I always look forward to meeting, people with a passion or that are thinking about maybe I should explore my passion, but I don't really know if it's okay to do that. Well, hopefully someone get their message out there to share who they really are. And I got to say, man, I'm so happy to have met you. Jesse, you're a stand-up guy, and I really appreciate this, man. I got to say thank you in true Canadian way. But I look forward to our future encounters, man, and maybe we'll talk again soon. I hope that you'll have me back on, and I will definitely look forward to having you on my show as well, bro.
Absolutely. I absolutely would love that. I think this is great. And this was so much fun. I knew it'd be, I'm going to have to send a thank you note to Ken.
Yeah.
I will probably tweet that right as soon as we end this. I'm going to send Ken a tweet thanking him
Thank you,
for all
Ken.
this. Yes, for all that do. Hang tight while I do a little business. All right. You listeners, please take care of yourself. Be safe, wash your hands, remember to social distance, wear an effing mask, be good to yourselves. The only way we're going to get through this is by being good to each other. And thank you for listening, and we will talk to you soon. Goodbye.
Bye.
This podcast would not be possible without the love and support of my listeners and specifically my patrons. Thank you very much to Levi Petrie, Elizabeth Bronson, Stephen Malio, Holly Mack, Steve Rogers, Dale Hosick, Terry Smith, Anna Lynn, Chris Bloom, and Mary Thomas. Thank you all for your support. It is greatly appreciated.
You just heard the fun talking, hard rocking, music loving, album ranking, fan thanking, joy spreading, lyric reading, story sharing podcast that is the one, the only Set Listing Bruce. Set Listing Bruce is part of the Southgate Media podcast group. The theme for Set Listing Bruce was written by David Rosen, used by permission.